Go in the Match podcast is now sponsored by Shirt Loot Box, home of mystery football shirts. As a listener of Go in the Match, you can get 10% discount using our promo code GTM10 at checkout. Treat yourself or a loved one to a mystery shirt box via their website www.shirtlootbox.co.uk and use our promo code GTM10 for 10% discount. Welcome back to the Go in the Match podcast. Today I'm very excited to be joined by Peter Kenny-Jones, Liverpool historian and author of Liddell at 100, a family portrait of a Liverpool icon, Billy Liddell. Peter, thanks for giving me your time today, mate, and coming on the podcast.
Oh, no worries. Thank you for wanting me to come on, and yeah, nice to meet you or see your face and speak to you properly. So yeah, thank you very much.
So before we get talking about your book and your story of writing it as well, can you just tell us where you were born, how you began following Liverpool Football Club?
Yeah, so I was born in Crosby, which depends who you ask. I had said it's in Liverpool. Some people say I'm not. That's where I was. That's where I brought up. Obviously, went to Hope Uni. So that was then I moved to around those ways where you now live in Highton. Yeah, been a Liverpool fan forever, really. First game I went to was Roma, 2001. My mate was actually mascot, so I managed to go and watch him. And then, yeah, basically my dad's been a season ticket holder since like forever. He's had the same seats as the Coppers all seated, so I used to try and go when I could, and I think it's since their Couch hat-trick against United was the last game I missed at Anfield. So since then I've gone to every match, so I just try and go as much as I can and where I can. But yeah, basically, yeah, just support them forever. Obviously, my middle name's Kenny, which kind of means I had no other option but to go down this path.
So it's just instilled from the family you were always going to be a Red. Have you got any Blues in the family at all, or?
Not like brothers and sisters ways, but my dad's brother, my uncle, he's a Blue, so there's a few of them on his side. All my mum's side are all Reds, but yeah, fortunately not like any in our family fights. But obviously we've had a few. Not even I argue. We don't what families are like. It's all a bit of a joke in it, but yeah. But my uncle, who's the Blue, he's one of the Merseyside, so he wants us to do well. Like he wants Everton to win the league and us to come second. That's basically what he wants to do, which I think is it's kind of going a bit over the years. But he's one of the more traditional ones who is Merseyside United. But I don't think there'll be too many people upset if they do go down this season. So I think he might be changing his views.
I mean, like I wasn't really going to ask this question, to be honest, but when you've been doing like the history of Liverpool and looking into those sort of things, have you sort of seen that? Obviously you used to see like Blues on the Kop, didn't you? And you'd see Reds in amongst it, Goodison Park. And you don't really see that anymore. Have you sort of had to look at that when you've been doing Liverpool history as well? That sort of tail off of, I don't know if togetherness is sort of the word, but there is more of a rivalry, more of a heated rivalry now.
Yeah, well, I think it's competition. I think it's hard to speak on it from a Liverpool side without sounding like you're trying to rub their face in it or something. But we've been better than them for a long time, and that's what doesn't help. When it used to be that if Everton won the league, we'd be second, and vice versa. You'd have that pride in Merseyside and think, no matter what, the Prem or the First Division, whatever, is coming to Merseyside this year, and you're gonna feel a lot more maybe connected to both teams. And if you see like the rise of United and City, and that's the option, you'd rather someone from Liverpool won it than someone from Manchester. So that's probably how it would have helped. But I think I'm not trying to plug it here, but when Liverpool got relegated, Billy Liddell wrote in the Echo and said, we hope Everton win the league and that we win the league this season. We'll be back in it. That was still a big part of it then, when they were just so united. And I think obviously with what happened with Hillsborough probably brought them back together. But after Heysel and a lot of the Everton fans today, or the younger ones, they obviously attribute some blame the fact that they didn't to win a European Cup because they were banned of it. Because obviously we can go into that. That'd be a whole other podcast. But that doesn't help. And then you go on for years and maybe everyone won stuff, and the winning run we have at Anfield and over them, I think obviously it doesn't help. And then when you have kids coming through who haven't seen their team win, and they're obviously going to hate the other side. But again, it's hard to say it from a Liverpool side without sounding like you're trying to wind them up. That's what I think it is, if you ask me.
Yeah, no, 100%. And obviously following Liverpool as well, I know you touched on, you've done the aways and, you've been to the cup finals, Kiev, Madrid. I think you went to go to Bâle as well in 2016. And
yeah,
have you got any sort of decent stories that you could share with our listeners? Because, obviously the podcast is about, fans going to the games and stories and stuff. So have you got anything decent you can share with our listeners?
Yeah, well, I think obviously the finals always feel like the biggest one because it's the most excitement about going. When we went to Basel, obviously we called it the Basel bus. We had like a mini bus with about 6-8 of us in, and we had a couple of us without tickets, so we had like any spares written on the back trying to see what we could do. But we just like went around France. My brother sorted a load of Airbnbs, and we were in like an old French train station. We stayed there, and it was like this couple came and they gave us a bottle of whiskey that was called Fanny. So that made us laugh just off the start, and then we're all having that, and obviously I couldn't drive then, so we had like my dad and my brother. They were both very hungover, trying to drive us from there to the edge, where our next house before we got the train to Basel from France. It was right on the edge. I know we had like this lad who was doing French in uni, and he was talking to everyone for us. That was all an interesting one. And then same year we went to Kiev, we had another Airbnb, but we said there was only 2 of us staying, but there was 8 of us against. We had people just sleeping in every corner. And I think it was the immersion heater went off us. And then my dad had to call my mum back at home and said, "Do you remember like the boiler we had in the 60s? Do you remember how they work?" And my mum was talking through. They got it going again because we obviously couldn't get him to come round because there was like 5 extra people in there. There should have been, and like there it was like 50p a pint. So I was a student at the time, so my dad said it was the only time I've stood me round because it was only costing like less than a £5 to buy everyone around it. So it was, they were both great trips. I think with Kiev, because we stayed a couple of days before and a couple of days after, obviously you had the upset that we lost, and you think we might never come here again. Obviously we did the next year, but those days after that, we're just going around the city, and obviously you see what's going on there now. It's mad, but that's probably like the best place I've ever been to, just on its own. That you felt like a millionaire there because the exchange rate, and obviously it was just a really good place to go. And Madrid was amazing as well. And we were in the square where Jamie Webster was singing, and they ran out of ice in the shop, so we bought all the little frozen veg packs, and we were using them to chill the beer. But obviously the sun was melting it, so then we had all like garlic tasting beer all day. So that wasn't the best plan we had. But it's all those stories, and obviously you go for the 90 minutes, but everything around it, that's what makes the trips. I think obviously cup finals stand out the most because it's a holiday, and also you just a lot more optimistic maybe than a normal game, and the whole affair. You just try and make sure you enjoy what happens before the match, before it all often seems to go wrong. This is what seems to happen, but yeah, fingers crossed for the next one it doesn't.
Yeah, I think you've hit the nail on the head. This sort of podcast was actually born out of the idea of not being able to go to the matches during COVID, and it was getting everyone's stories on. And we had Keith Salmon on, we had Geordie Holden, who's part of Spine Cop as well. And, they were coming on, they were saying the exact same thing, that, that 90 minutes just gets in the way, to be honest, doesn't it? At the time of recording, we just went to the Norwich game, and obviously living in the Isle of Man, doing the planes over, or if it's in the summer, it's the boat, it's the traveling that is the best part, isn't it? All the stories you get, obviously the European ones, when you go away to the arse end of nowhere and just create these stories, and that is literally what it's all about, isn't it?
Oh yeah, that's what you look forward to. That's why you go, isn't it? Yeah. So even if you go or not, as you said, we went to Paris, PSG when we had to in the group stage. We never had a ticket. We went to the boss night there, and like even that was an amazing trip. Just at the whole square. I think I had the only bottle opener in the whole square. There was a queues of people coming up and just fighting them all off, and everyone. So like, as you say, it's not about the match because we lost that one, and it was still great. So
yeah. And, touching on the home games, and something I wanted to get your thoughts on was, I know obviously you go to Anfield as well, and you're a similar age to me, so obviously both going to the games. I just wanted to get your thoughts on how the match days improved in and around Anfield and for the home games, because, say maybe in the days of Hodgson in 2010, obviously we were pretty turgid then on the pitch, but the atmosphere in the ground wasn't great either. They'd be very silent, not even just necessarily because of the lads on the pitch, but it just wasn't as good, I felt, when I was younger. And you compare it to today, and I know we're a much better team, but I think, 2 things that have improved it for me is, what lads do at the Sparring Cop, the flags on the cop, and Jim Webster, boss nights, and taggies and everything like that. I think all these things have improved. Would you say have you seen that improvement growing up as a Liverpool fan, going to the games at home?
Yeah, well, I think I'm probably one of the only people who's grateful for Roy Hodgson because of him. I got to start going to matches because I think, as you say, maybe the atmosphere or the love of it wasn't as good as it possibly could have been. So that's what got my way in. So I think maybe because of the way it stayed were my first ones, I probably were thinking they were a bit better than what they were. But it was just about going the game then. But I think once you realise how much it's improved, I think the big one was when we came second under Brendan Rodgers. That season just seemed to be unbelievable. Like obviously that's when the coach welcomes were probably at the height, and you just remember what it was like going to all them. And then obviously it didn't work out then, and we managed to get back into Europe though when the Champions League ones, and those nights were just amazing. Like that City game and when we got to Kiev that year, that was just unbelievable. It just didn't stop. And then we had the coach welcomes then. I remember me and my mate went, and I felt like I was in like a war scene. You couldn't see your hands run to your face. It was just red smoke. We had no idea where the crowd. Like we were trying to walk up to it. It was just mad. And those things are what stay with you again. And the Roma one, obviously it's changed now. It's all on your phone. I obviously had to be ticket, but I always move around every game in the Cop. I haven't got a season ticket, but obviously just go to every match one by one.
Yeah.
And I always used to forget to check where my seat was before kickoff. And then my dad went, "Oh, where are you sitting?" I was like, "No idea." And then obviously don't know what it's like on the Cop. It's just you got no signal at all. So I just walked up the Cop and was just like, I have no idea where to stand. So I just went in front of someone. I was like, "This definitely isn't my seat, but I've got no idea where I'm supposed to be." So don't worry. And then all the aisles were full of people, and just of that Roma match was mad because it was almost too easy, and then it became a game, didn't it? But I just remember that one as well. You just think maybe that one gets forgotten a little bit because we beat City, and obviously because we didn't win the final. But I think that's probably one of the best atmospheres I've been in. Maybe not one of the best games, but that atmosphere just before was just unbelievable. And then you can't always go to European away games. The boss nights for the semi-finals, and with that Roma one especially, and the City game that year, it was just it all seemed to work perfectly up until the final. But and a late start, and it was just all that stuff. I think that was probably the best period, and when we started realising under Klopp, we can win stuff, and that's what makes the atmosphere better, doesn't it? When you think you're watching a team that can easily win every competition they're in, and that definitely helps create a brilliant atmosphere. And obviously it's been like that for a good few years now, thankfully.
And we will go on to talk about Jurgen Klopp's current Liverpool team on just for the listeners later on, but let's dive into you and yourself. So obviously, as stated at the start, you're a Liverpool historian. So could you just tell us a bit about where you studied to become a historian, and sort of learn your trade for that? And is that something that you wanted to do at a young age? Be an author and get into that side of things?
No, not really. I surprised myself a bit that I've written a book, but I did history basically because I was quite good at it more than I loved it, and I did that at uni, which is something I carried too. But I wanted to do teaching, so I went in doing primary teaching with history, and Liverpool Hope was the only place that did that. But I ended up doing like 2 weeks of teaching and just hated it, and just asked if I could just do straight history. So I just stuck with that basically, and then so you do the 3 years, and still it was okay. Again, probably I didn't think I'd ever continue with it. And then obviously you finish with your dissertation. They just said, "What you want to do it on?" And I said, "Can I do it on footy?" Thinking they say no, and they just said yeah. So I was like, great. So the first one I did interwar periods, Liverpool and Everton, and why the fans in Merseyside were spending money on football when they had no money, and we obviously just finished one more and they were about to start another one. But I also did about cinemas in that one as well, so it was maybe me trying to be a bit more historical then. And then did all right, really enjoyed uni. All my mates were staying on, so I did a master's. I was one of the ones who did it, but I thought I'll just do it again. And then at the end of that one, obviously it's a lot bigger dissertation. They said, "What you want to do?" So I just did Liverpool and Everton in the 60s, and looked at Bill Shankly and Harry Catterick. And then again, I just didn't think that you could go to uni and talk about Liverpool. I didn't think things would overlap, but it did. And then I realised when I finished, I just had this like body of work that my dad would be interested in, and people his age. So I just kind of like chopped it up and put it out as articles to, all websites, fan sites, stuff like that, and they all just said they liked it. Do you want to keep going? So I just carried on writing, and then it just kind of spread from there. Really, it was Stephen Doan, who was the Liverpool FC's like club historian.
All right.
He just said to me, "Don't be like too partisan with it. Don't just try and be Liverpool forever." Which obviously, maybe if you obviously you can't see it here. If you look at my room, you might think I'm a bit Liverpool roots, but I do try and broaden it a bit. It's just obviously I've got more maybe expertise about Liverpool, so I tried to write for as many different people as possible. Then it's all just kind of channeled into being able to write this book, which obviously is about Liverpool, but it was more being able to touch on the historical side, and I think probably that's where the long story is of how it all started, really.
Yeah. It sounds similar to, we obviously had James Pearce on the podcast about a year ago as well, and he said a very similar thing, that when he started getting into media, he didn't necessarily have the chance to go straight into Liverpool, so he did a bit on Everton first, and we did a bit on other sports before he got into Liverpool, and he said that actually helped him, maybe sort of swerve his bias sometimes. And did you find that maybe like touching on, you said you did a bit about Everton as well, did that maybe help you in the long run to doing your book, that you gained a little bit of experience doing that?
Yeah, well, I think, being in uni as well, obviously, you're not just with people from your own city, are you? People from all around the country, all around the world. So, there was no Evertonians in my group. And I remember, in that Rodgers season when we beat Everton 4-1, I do remember thinking like, I wish I was in school now going in and winding all the Everton fans up. And it's not there. So maybe you get a step removed from it. And my missus is an Everton fan as well, so I always try and be a bit nicer to her about it. Thankfully, it's going well in my favour, so I try not to rub her face in it too much when anything goes well for us and badly for them. So I think that did help, that I could then do that. And obviously, her family are all big Everton fans, and I've got my uncle and that. And you just think, you don't want to. You want as many people as possible probably to get involved with it, and that your friends and family are going to be the ones who support you the most. So yeah, I think that did help, and being able to speak to my uncle and my missus' uncles and stuff like that for the dissertation, you realise, obviously Liverpool is what means the most to me, but you realise every club and every fan has got their own story, and all these things mean the most to them. So it's good to try and give the stories of people that have them in the head. Like Harry Catterick, to me, as a Liverpool fan in the 20s, I didn't really know who he was, but like his record stood up there with Bill Shankly in terms of what he'd won for Everton. I'd never even heard his voice before, never mind, him much more before I did the dissertation. So I think, there's a lot of people who get forgotten, and a lot of people get, rightly so, with Bill Shankly. Obviously, he's remembered and will be remembered forever, but there's people who probably have a similar trophy haul to him who have been forgotten in that era, and I think that was good to do that. And that made me realise, every club has got someone like that who deserves to have their story shared.
Yeah, and so obviously your book you published November last year, I think I'm right in saying. Could you just tell us a bit about the book? What gave you the drive to go down that route? Talking about Billy Liddell, and if one of our listeners haven't read it and they're interested in it, can you sort of give like a brief explanation of what they would be reading upon? Obviously you touched on earlier about wartime football, so obviously they were still trying to play football during the war. Can you tell us, our listeners, a bit about what the whole book is?
Yeah. Well, obviously, Billy Liddell, it's his life. So from start to finish, and he's still the fourth top goal scorer in Liverpool's history. He retired as the top goal scorer, most appearances. He's the only player alongside Stanley Matthews to have represented Great Britain more than once. And basically, he was Liverpool Football Club. It was called Liverpool at the time because of how influential he was. And I think, again, me going into it as someone who said they liked history, I knew it was called Liverpool. I knew he must have been quite good, and that was probably about all I knew about him. And then you just think, there must be stories behind it, and it is. And speaking to as many people as I did, everyone who'd seen him play said he was as good as Kenny Dalglish and Steven Gerrard. There was no question about whether it may be whatever. He definitely was, to some better, to some as good as. I think for people like him to be in the history of my club, for the benches outside Liverpool, he's one of the names on there that maybe not everyone knows. You've got Elijah Scott, Billy Liddell, John Barnes, Steven Gerrard, Kenny Dalglish, and you see those names, and then maybe people aren't realising who Billy Liddell is, and you think it was time to do his story. It obviously worked that it was his 100th birthday coming up, which seemed like a good time to do it. And then there was the fact, obviously, I knew his sister. He was good friends with my auntie. So being able to speak to her, she obviously gave me like first-hand access to, like, I've read letters between him and his mum and stuff like that, and newspaper clippings, which, I'm not sure if you've seen LFC history site, like they had match reports on there that they'd never seen before and stuff like that. So like it was a real like archive of family history that I'd been given, just on top of having all that stuff to look at. So it was just it just felt like a good time to do it. And I think he's the best player in Liverpool's history that's the least known about, if you know what I mean, trying to balance it up. I think, everyone knows Kenny and Gerrard, and you could write another book on them, and there's been plenty of them, but for the only books that have been written on him are by himself when he retired. John Keefe did one just as he died. I think, it felt like a good time to do it again. There's a lot of people who have been able to reflect on his life and talk about him. So I think it all kind of met together, and hopefully the book does justice to that.
Yeah, you spoke there about some of the individuals that you got in touch with. Did you get? Was I right in saying you get Carragher on there, and you got to speak to like Paul Moran and people like that as well? And how did you find like interacting with them? And were they really interested about the book? Because obviously it's a bit of a stand out. No one else will have done a book on Billy Liddell. So did they seem like really keen to help you with that?
Yeah, well, obviously I don't think it was anything to do with me. It was all to do with Billy Liddell. But obviously he was it was a massive help to be able to have his name and saying, "No, that's why I'm writing this book." And obviously you said Jamie Carragher, Ian Callaghan, Alan Hansen were the three people I got into do the forward for me, which is obviously massive. And I think they represented like a good period of the history, really, because Ian Callaghan took the shirt off him. He was the one who basically took his position. We had Alan Hansen, who was obviously a young Scot coming in and could go and feed off his knowledge in the club at the time. And then Jamie Carragher, through being coached by Ronnie Moran, who played with him, he was still getting the name Billy Liddell while he was playing in the 90s. So you can see how far-reaching Billy's legacy was within the club. And then for them to want to speak was great. And I also wanted to speak to as many people as possible who obviously played with him or knew him. And that was always going to be, a big part of the story. And to be able to speak with people that actually shared the pitch with him was amazing. I just basically went one by one in quite a morbid way of seeing who was still alive, who I could talk to. And there wasn't many, unfortunately, from how many people he'd played with, which again probably made it quite a timely time to do it, because it's an era of Liverpool's history that is about to go extinct. So I think to have his name behind it really helped for people to want to speak about him. And as I said, I think there was a lot of fans and players from the time who realised how good he was, and probably can acknowledge now that he isn't as respected as he should be. So I think that obviously helped, and to be able to speak to them just as a Liverpool fan myself, if you take off just trying to do it for research purposes, is amazing to be able to speak to Jamie Carragher and have him on the other end of your phone, and still got the shakes while you're talking to him and stuff like that. So it was it was a bit surreal, and I'm trying to do it again with some other books, trying to track people down. And I think I found it was a lot easier when it was Billy Liddell than it was Peter Jones. I think a lot more people are a bit more interested in him than they are me, but hopefully that all comes to it at the end. But it was just amazing to be able to speak to those people, and really thankful for them, because obviously that adds to the book, and I wanted it to be the words of people who knew him, not just me research them and writing it up.
Yeah, brilliant. And this might sound a bit of a stupid question, but it's almost easier to write about Liverpool's past than maybe in like the past 5 years. Does that make the book a bit more chunkier, if you like?
Yeah, well, obviously you can, if you're referring to today, I've just said there, 18-19 season, you've got all the memories you need and that, and it comes into your head, and you know what happens at the end of the season. But then, if you refer to the season, or we know how bad it was in 50-51, and you're like, well, I need to go into a bit more depth, and obviously that will help fill pages up on the book if that's what you want to look at it as what I was doing. But I always think, again, because of what's happened in the past, there's less people to fact check, which does help, less of them around who maybe can prove you wrong. But I think it is like it's something I quite enjoy doing, because I think that period of the history, it's good to try and build up the knowledge of it, because people are going to read that book, maybe not just looking at Billy Liddell, but maybe look at what the club was like right on the dawn of becoming the best in Europe, as it was 10, 15 years after Billy left. So he was right on the cusp of the good times that are about to come. So I think it's an interesting insight into that period, and obviously the wartime football, which he was heavily involved in. I hardly knew anything about that, and I think that whole period is just no one really seems to care about it. It's taken off the records, but really it was a massive thing in everyone's lives at the time. Obviously they were fighting a war, but there was also still football going on. Some of Billy's best years were in the wartime, but for him to still finish as top appearances, top goal scorer, for him to still be the 4th top goal scorer today, despite having the whole of World War II playing time taken off him, it just shows how great he was, really.
And without giving away too much of what is in the book, if you were going to sell this sort of book to someone that was listening on the podcast today, have you got any sort of like facts or story about Billy Liddell that would sort of entice people to read the book? Anything that you could give us that would stand out that people may not know?
Yeah, one thing maybe people do know or don't know, it gets ruined at the start of the chapter because it's called Winning the League. So 46-47, the first year after the war ended, Liverpool won the league, and that's probably what a lot of people might know or might not even know that fact. But the way in which they won it was amazing. Like they were miles away, and then all the results just fell Liverpool's way, and they basically had no chance, and then they fell at the final hurdle, and then it came back to them, and it was just like, if you think of the Aguero moment, I mean, they basically had like 5 games of that, because it was just going left, right, centre, and they were playing a Senior Cup final at the time, which obviously is just like more of a local one. They were playing against Everton, but they had the scoreboard of the Sheffield United game, which is they were wanting them to need the result to go their way against Stoke for order to Liverpool to win the league. But obviously there's no tellies and everything, so the best way for them all to get together was to go the match. So they're all watching Liverpool play, but while some bloke is updating the scoreboard for them, and when the full-time whistle goes there, it's while Liverpool are still playing against Everton. And so you can imagine Liverpool winning the league while the ground's full and they're not even playing. Like, you can imagine what the scenes would have been like then. Yeah. It probably would have been more throwing your bowler hats in the air, and it would have been lighting your smoke bombs and whatever it would have been today. But that's, that was amazing writing that, and just writing that running. I was getting excited writing it, thinking, what's the next game, and researching it all. So that was a really interesting one. There's the 1950 FA Cup final, which was again an interesting one, and how Billy was basically marked and kicked out the game. And then I've got the story of the goal that never was, which I think is quite a good one as well, where Billy scored in the last second against Man City. All the fans in the stadium thought they'd won. They thought they'd equalise, and it was going to extra time. They all stayed inside, and they had to put on the tannoy announcement the referee had blown the whistle before it went in the back of the net. So you can imagine, again, if that happened and the crowd's full and everyone's expecting extra time, and then you can hear George Sefton saying, "Oh, sorry, by the way, they've disallowed that one." You can imagine how much that'd kick off. I don't think they'd be. I don't think the City players would be allowed to leave the field, and never mind the ref. So it's interesting to look at how fans differ from then to today, and you just think football's so different. But then you look, how there was a season where they were on the cusp of winning a double, and it all fell apart at the end. And then there's another season where they had no right to win it, and they won it. So it's all those stories. I think you just think, because it happened 50, 60, 100 years ago, it doesn't matter. But I think the more you look into them, it is just football's the same. That's the quality of team that they had, and Liverpool were right up there then for a large period. I think those are the most interesting ones, when about the cup ties and the games that were trying to settle the league. They're still interesting then, and I think there's quite a few good ones in there, and Billy seems to have a big part to play in a lot of them.
What I would say is that I admire quite a lot about you is obviously that we're similar age. I class myself as quite a big red, going to the games and stuff like that. I would not know anything about Billy Liddell, and I wouldn't probably think to go back as far as and research, do all this research that you've obviously put so much hard work into. But being a historian about Liverpool, do you think it's really important maybe for the younger Liverpool generation coming through now, seeing the great team that we do have? Do you think it's really important that they know about the past and they learn and, they hear all these stories? Do you think that's quite an important thing? Because that's what I would admire quite a lot about you, for digging all this out and sort of showing people.
Well, yeah, I'm not one for transfer rumours. That's not really what I like to do. I feel like it's going to happen at some point, but I think a lot of people like to read what's happening right now and, who we might sign in the summer and trying to think of the future and that, which obviously is fine. And obviously I'm excited that Luis Diaz comes in, and once the news comes in, it's great. But I think there's a lot of time that you can waste as a Liverpool fan reading about stuff that might not happen, and who Leeds have got injured in the next game, or whatever match you're playing. I think it's more important to know about what came before, and just to go on those benches again for Liverpool to acknowledge Elijah Scott and Billy Liddell with the bench and put them alongside Bob Paisley and Bill Shankly, men of the same ilk. Then you should not having to go you personally, but you should know who these people are. And I think Elijah Scott's the first hero of the Kop, the first man to have his name sung. But again, people probably don't know much more than that. And just through doing little articles that I obviously teach myself while I'm doing it, I just think it's a lot more interesting. And again, I love Steven Gerrard and I always will. But, I know what he did in 2005 and I know how good he was in those years. And, you can rewatch stuff and go back on it, that's fine. But I think, learning about what came before, football didn't start in 1992, which is like Sky like to think, and Liverpool Football Club didn't start with Bill Shankly. There's a lot of years before that as well. It's easy to just disregard things. And as the years go on, probably what Shankly did will be still acknowledged, but maybe you would be able to say, how many leagues did he win? When did he take over? People won't know. They'll just know he was good. And I think it's important that maybe this seems to be the era now. At the end of it's the start of Shankly's time. These players are dying out basically, and it's a good time to maybe get down what they're saying and speak to these people. And it's going to be the '65 FA Cup final team. They're going to be the next heroes. So probably the whole team will be wiped off soon, which obviously is sad to think about. But that was a massive thing that came in Liverpool's history, and it won't be long till it's 77 in Rome and all that. So it's important to, not in the least morbid way possible, trying to get all these stories off these people who played in them. And and then if you get it written down, whether it's me or anyone else, if you get it written down in the book, it'll always be there. And it's good to look back at the past and acknowledge, we've got 19 league titles. The 19th one means as much as the first one. So it's good about looking at each and every one. And that Champions War we're all so proud of. Let's see what these people did and how we won them.
Fair enough, mate. And sort of going forward from this book and looking into the future, have you got anything planned? Any other ideas for any new books or anything?
Yeah, well, I've set myself a bit of a target to write 5 books by the time I'm 30, and I'm 27. So I think I've said it a few times, so that I feel like I have to do it now. But I'm currently writing my next 2. One's like an autobiography with, obviously not about myself, with a former Liverpool player, and I'm doing one on Liverpool and Everton, which obviously I'll be able to announce fully soon when it's all sorted. But they're the ones I want to do, and then after that, I want to try and maybe do another autobiography with a former player, and then try and think of another idea of someone to do about. I think someone who's really interesting at the moment is Gordon Hodgson, again, because I think, every time Mo Salah scores, you get these lists now of these players, and there's only 4 people who've scored 200 goals for Liverpool. Salah's just scored his 150th. He's going to be wanting to get in that list, and I think a lot of people know about Ian Rush. I've done Billy Liddell, so there's Roger Hunt and Gordon Hodgson. I think I think more people know about Roger Hunt, obviously, with him sadly passing away recently, and obviously being involved in the '66 World Cup. But I think with Gordon Hodgson, because of the period he was in, it'd be nice to maybe look at him, and hopefully no one gets in there before me. But I think he'd be someone good to look at. But then there's loads of ideas, and I think like Phil Taylor, the manager before Bill Shankly, I think it'd be interesting to look at. The lowest point, sadly, in our club's history before the glory that came after us, and just all stuff like that. And I just think I quite like doing it on a player or a person, and just looking at their whole life and what they gave to, whether it was Liverpool, Everton, whatever club. If the story is interesting enough, I think it's good to try and just recognise these people and, as I say, hopefully just bring their name to a new audience and let a few new people appreciate who they are. And so it all started with Billy, and hopefully that goes well and they can all keep going well and keep doing it.
Fantastic. And obviously I can't let you go without talking about where we are currently at this point in the season with this Jurgen Klopp team. So at the time of recording, we just beat Norwich, and Spurs have just done us a massive favour and beaten City at the Etihad. Leaves us 6 points off with a game in hand, which we play Leeds tomorrow at home. Just beat Inter Milan 2-0 at San Siro. It's not bad for some. And we're into the next round of the Champions League. We've got a cup final on Sunday against Chelsea in the Carabao Cup. Still in the FA Cup. Do you think you could do the quadruple?
Well, the thing is, it's not a stupid comment to say we can, which is a good sign of where we are at the moment. Isn't it? You know, with him, it's exciting going every week and watching this team, and you know, whether you're there or not, it's great to watch them play, and we can do it. And you know, it's took City to draw with Southampton and to get beat by Tottenham to suddenly, and now the title race is blown open. And obviously, it's easier to say that's 2 games, and we wouldn't expect them to probably drop points against them. But you know, hopefully our good form just keeps going, because when we get a run going, we seem to stay on it for a while. Same with City, and hopefully they can splutter a bit and we can just keep going. And you know, to try and win the first cup will be a big one, and that'll get them all going. And you know, they'll have an itch and they'll want to keep winning trophies. So yeah, it's exciting. I don't want to predict and say we will, but you know, you'd like to think that we can win the Prem and or the Champions League would be good. If we win both domestic cups, I don't think people will be too upset. But obviously, I think where we are right now, for us to be, hopefully, you know, we should be in the top 2 of the Prem. Hopefully, we get to the final of the Champions League, and then we'll see what happens. And it's just great to be able to say that, and not you won't be laughed at by anyone else, because it is probably true. We are one of the top 2 or 3 teams in Europe, and definitely one of the top 2 in England. It's just, unfortunately, City are very good, and they won't be easy to beat or stop. But yeah, it's just exciting. Hopefully, each game now, the atmosphere is going to be wrapped up every game, isn't it? And Anfield's just going to get louder and louder. And you just need to keep going our way. And just fingers crossed, we have 4 cups on that bus tour we've been promised for years.
And obviously, well, that's the thing I was going to touch on. Obviously, you know, people are writing books already about this team. Obviously, win the league for so long, and do you think in 20, 30 years' time, you'll be writing a book about this, you know, the story under Jurgen Klopp, you know, the Europa League final in 2016, all the way to COVID, winning the league? You know, there is some stories there for an author to write, isn't there?
Oh, yeah, it'd be a good one. It'd be a lot easier for me. I can remember a lot more of it than what Billy Liddell was doing. But yeah, you can. It's really easy to say. You know, it all seems to be perfect. Even looking back to, you know, writing an article recently about the Capital One Cup final against City, you know, a few months into his reign. Yeah. That just feels like years ago, which it was, but you know, it just feels like a lifetime ago when you see how different the team is now. And you know, we've seen all these Thomas Tuchel comparisons and Pep Guardiola, but I think the job that Klopp's done is far above what anyone else has done. And we have got the best manager. I think it's just he doesn't like to, or we don't like to spend the money that the other teams do. And he just does so well. He's the best manager or the best coach, because he turns average players into superstars. And you know, Diogo Jota is probably the biggest example of that. No one was excited when he came, or maybe not excited, but didn't expect him to be what he was. You know, if for Wolves fans, they were saying like he's our 4th best attacker, and not even that bothered that he's going. And you know, now I think everyone in Europe would be scared to come up against him. I think that's the job that Jurgen Klopp does. I don't think you see Guardiola and Tuchel buying average players and making them well beaters. And I think as soon as he goes, I'm scared of what happens. As much as I'm excited of what maybe Gerrard could do, I think Jurgen Klopp going will be the biggest loss possibly we could ever have. So it's about finding that next one without making them upset about, you know, looking already. But yeah, it's exciting. You just got to live in the moment, which is not what you should say as a historian, but yeah, live in the moment and just try and enjoy every game. And yeah, as long as Jurgen Klopp's there, I think the good times will keep coming.
That's it, mate. And we always end the podcast by asking our guests, what are your 3 favourite matches you've ever been to or seen?
It's hard. I feel like I won't say Istanbul just because there's been so many good ones, because I was only in year 5, so I couldn't really, you know, obviously I do remember it, and I remember saying to my mum at half time we were still going to win, and I was right. Maybe if I was older, I'd be able to put a bet on and got some more money out of it. But yeah. I think if I go on maybe once I've been to, for some reason I always go to the League Cup semi-final before we won it 10 years ago against City. I just remember when Craig Bellamy scored, and
I went to that.
Yeah, I don't know why it always just kind of resonated with me, because it's the first time I've been to Wembley and the first time I proper go in the match. It just felt like I was really a part of it, and that atmosphere was great. And I just remember leaving, and we were right near the front of the Kop, and looking back and just hearing everyone sing Wembley and all the flags were going. I just felt, you know, you heard your dad's talking about how good Liverpool used to be, and it felt like, you know, these are our memories to start. And obviously it took a few years till Klopp came, but I think that was obviously a massive one. Then again, unfortunately, against City, I don't want to make them sound like a massive club, but it was when we didn't win the league under Brendan Rodgers. I think that game when Coutinho scored, just because I thought we were going to, and I think, if I denied at a time, I'm denying myself that I did. I really enjoyed that game, and it was the first time I allowed myself to think we could win the league, and obviously it makes it painful because we didn't. But again, that atmosphere and that season, I think, I remember looking at the scoreboard 15, 20 minutes. If we hadn't scored a couple of goals, you started worrying. The football we played was amazing. I think Brendan Rodgers gets a bit of a bad time for maybe how it ended, but that season will always be one of the best ones. And whether it's because of him or because of Gerrard or because of Suarez, whatever it was still great fun to go. So I always think of them too. And then I just think you want to put Madrid in again, but it wasn't the best game that we ever watched, was it? Let's be honest. So probably, hopefully the best one will be when we beat City this year. That'll be a good one to put in there. But yeah, I just one of those Champions League ones, maybe the Roma one from what I said, but then it all pales into insignificance when you look at the Barcelona comeback, doesn't it? So I thought I'd give a few honourable mentions, but that's obviously the best game you can ever going to see when we needed to overturn the 3-goal deficit, and we did it. And I had such belief we would, and I couldn't believe it came true. I had belief Divock Origi was going to be a star, and I was right again. I didn't put enough money on back me thoughts enough, but that game was just, you'll never forget it, will you? And obviously, but Origi and Wijnaldum, and it's just great. If you can go back to one moment, I just always wished that Origi and Wijnaldum's goals were the way around, because as good as Origi's was, you weren't really sure what happened. You were like, is that offside? Is that you couldn't really properly celebrate? But that Wijnaldum header, obviously you could see it coming in. It's the back of the net, and that just explosion. Then I think that is, if I could have even 20 seconds of my life again, I'd go back to that. Just that when Shaqiri crosses that ball, that's when I'd go back to, because that was just unbelievable. I think that's probably the best match you'll ever be able to see. And for it to be at Anfield and to be there, and what happened, it was just unbelievable. But thankfully, there's so many. To West Ham, 2006, Dortmund, the comeback. There's so many games that I've been lucky enough to go to and enjoy. And yeah, as I say, hopefully there's a few more this season we can add to that, and we can win that quadruple. And maybe that FA Cup final or the Champions League final, we win the fourth one. That'll be the best game.
And the rest would be history, wouldn't it?
There it is. Yeah, I done that. You can have that one.
So just before I let you go, mate, I just want to say a massive thank you for giving up your time, coming on. And where can our listeners go to purchase your book and follow you on social media?
Yeah, well, the best place for me is through my website. So probably if you just follow me on Twitter, that's pretty easy one, at Peter Kenny Jones. You just go on that, the link to the books on there. But obviously, if you don't want to do that, it's fine. It's on Amazon, WH Smith, Waterstones, all them. And yeah, that's what I'm on. I write for Empire of the Cop as well, so I do articles for them all the time, and I try and do historical stuff when I can, and hopefully there'll be a few more books coming out soon. So yeah, just give us a follow, and hopefully you enjoy what you see.
Okay, I'll put the link directly for that in our bio for the podcast as well for our listeners. They can go straight to it.
Oh, boss, thank you very much. I think you get signed books, everything through there as well. And as far as I know, that's the only place you can do it. So yeah, that'd be great. And thank you very much.
No problem. Thank you again, mate.
No worries. Nice to speak to you. Thanks for having me on.
If you enjoyed that episode and want to keep notified for future episodes, please make sure you subscribe, follow and share. And of course, leave us a 5-star rating. You can now follow us on Facebook, Instagram and Twitter, all at Go in the Match, to keep updated for future episodes and updates on the podcast.